All these once proud vampires have is a tiny cave to shield them from the sun, and a thrall out gathering hay to make sleeping on the rocks a little bit easier. You're ostensibly supposed to build great villages and castles in this game, but that's outright impossible when you've modded it to make your villagers into vampires confined to the darkness. The underground has no food, almost no space, and heavily limited resources. But to stay safe from vampire hunters and their own hunger alike, these three are going to have to grow their domain while sourcing everything they need from friendly and less friendly visitors. Some of these methods even ended up being so effective that I'm going to start using them in my regular playthroughs. There is a temporary lore-appropriate exception in Mr. Sacrifice. They're a thrall completely controlled by me, of vampiric magic. He'll harvest some hay and chop some trees, then haul it all back to the shadows. Wood is absolutely required for almost every workbench, and the only way to get any underground is to already have some. But this exception is a one-time thing, and it's not going to last long. The vampires don't have nearly enough wood, but one day without food is all they can take. It's Saw's time. But these vampires are pacifists. It's a sin against the Dark Father below to strike anyone directly or indirectly. Fortunately, some of the local wildlife can get worked into a frenzy. One such wolf chases Saw over to the cave, where he ultimately stops fighting back and just accepts his violent death. The thrall managed to gather 100 hay and a few hundred wood for his dark masters. The first part of turning this pathetic cave into a grandiose vampire mansion is turning Saw into a meal, so a butchering table goes in. That name might seem barbaric, but this is practically a holy altar to the local breed of vampirism. The whole reason they're cannibal bloodsuckers in the first place is food. You can't grow crops underground, you need food to actually bait animals in to turn into food, and while Skep's woodwork, they require a lot of research, and a meal of just honey can't possibly be healthy. So let's cut Saw up and eat him instead. Hengst, the oldest vampire, does the job and makes enough meat for several days, but that means that there's no more wood coming in. The next sacrifices also aren't going to be willing thralls. Solving that issue will involve mining a path around the main entrance. And besides, what kind of ancient vampire underground pacifist murder mansion doesn't have hidden passages? This critical junction at the front is going to get mined out, then covered up with some floor. A wicker door also goes in on the other side. Wood would be sturdier, but it's also a lot more precious, and this should be fine. The last thing that's needed is a merchant stall to lure traders into place. Hopefully they won't mind the smell coming off the nearby butchering table. Loops upon loops. More hidden side passages get queued up to be mined out, although that's more of a long-term thing. First, this little workspace gets mined out and a basic research table goes in. Most of the research tree is not going to help, but there are some critical technologies that need to be unlocked. There's more than enough stone for a shrine. Their prayers are answered soon after. A merchant arrives and makes the mistake of approaching. Now that she's inside, it's time to spring the trap by mining out the back and deconstructing the floor they just put in. Bergwina eventually gets tired of standing in a dark, smelly cave. She lasted longer than I would, but she finds herself trapped and unable to leave. Her faction gets angrier and angrier, but it's a small price to pay, and the vampires are all in a good mood. Their recent meals taste even better knowing there's a fresh victim in the pipeline. Oh, and there's more coming. A would-be villager followed by a raid arrives. It's gonna be a lot harder to ensnare these than the merchant was. I'll take in Galfred, but only to bait the attack. He can do a little bit of light hauling until he starves, while compelled with an enthrallment too weak to let him wander outside the cave. I'm more interested in the attackers following him. Bergwin is finally angry enough to become an attacker herself, although it's not gonna do much. She's still trapped, and more importantly, her food bar finally hits 0. Starving makes her start taking damage. That's right, in order for the vampires to avoid starving, they're gonna be extreme pacifists that trap merchants and invaders alike until they starve to death. The raid's close, and there's only a couple snacks worth of Saw left, but Bergwina finally dies. In a super pacifist way. Her corpse did what she couldn't and escapes the trap just in time. Some floors go in to reset the trap, plus a couple walls to hide the secret passage and make it, secret. The merchants didn't mind, but our next victims will. And just like that, they're here. 8 above grounders want Galfred back, pathetic as he is. Convincing them to stay won't be as easy as it was with Bergwina, but by walling off the hidden passages, there's only one way deeper into the cave, and they stumble through. That wicker door they beat on starts going down fast. Who thought putting it there was a good idea? Hengst rushes to deconstruct the floor just beyond it. A few fools still stumble in even without a path deeper into the base. The dim light makes it harder for them to see what's going on, while Roysia emerges from the hidden passage behind them and destroys the entrance. They don't have an archer to shoot back at her as she retreats. 5 of the 8 raiders get trapped. It's not bad, but it's going to be a big problem in the future. They declare defeat. Those that can flee do so. The others stay trapped, but the fact that 3 escaped is a big problem. The base needs improvements for 2 reasons. That starts with making limestone bricks for support beams that'll go in on the right side. The first reason is capacity. Bergwina took 3 days to starve to death and almost ruined the trap for the next visitors. Raids alone can hit more often than that, and merchants and raiders can arrive back to back. The second and more important reason lies with those that fled. They're already spreading news of the vampire threat. Blacksmiths far and wide have started tipping their weapons with silver. Even an arrow grazing Roysia as she retreats will kill her, meaning the current strategy of letting them actually see the vampires won't work. The lesser thrall Galfred finally starves. The invaders start to head that way too, giving the vampires their first batch of new wood. A woodworking bench goes in place of the stonemasons one, not to make gear, but to recycle the wooden stakes and armor dropped by fallen foes. Those 5 soldiers only gave me about 30 in total. It'll have to do, since this is the only way we're ever gonna get more wood. Yet another reason to try and trap more of the soldiers. That's 1 full season gone. They're just getting started on the second trap, but it's gonna take at least another season to get ready. It needs to be big enough to handle huge armies. Time skip half a season later and the first level isn't even done yet. Yeah, first level. Gunilda mines, Roisia builds shrines to get rid of some of the stone, and Hengst researches. The initial first level plan finishes getting mined out, but I actually want to expand that a little bit more, not for functionality, but for decoration. What kind of vampire wants to live in a cave guarded by a pacifist death trap that's boring? Certainly not the kind that finishes all the research they've got planned in less than 2 seasons. It's not much, but there's nothing else that'd even potentially be beneficial, and now Hengst can help haul and mine to finish all this arduous work left on the trap. This is seriously gonna take forever. All done. I mean, not just like that. It actually took about 2 seasons of mining and building every day to get this finished but untested final product. But this way, it'll be as much of a surprise to their enemies as it is to you, dedicated and loyal viewer, who's gonna go like this video and subscribe right now. The trap itself doesn't actually look like that much. Fortunately, a raid arrives to help prove otherwise. What's now a dedicated merchant entrance is walled off, so enemies charge past that. One moves to the door to start beating on it, but it's sturdy enough to stand up for a long time. More stumble in and look at their surroundings. Creepy, but fitting Oak Brethren shrines line the walls, even from below. Wait, below? Out of sight, Roisia moves to deconstruct one thing. Everything collapses. Every last raider falls 3 stories to the pit below. There's no entrance in sight, no possible escapes or way to shoot back. They never even saw their kidnappers. Only more shrines surround them, their meager candles flickering the darkness away for brief moments. A merchant caravan arrives at the same time, proving the need to have 2 different traps, but all that pathfinding makes the game lag super badly. Gunilda and Hengst just stand around unsure of what to do, so I let the merchants go. There's already enough food in the pipeline. The raiders start dropping dead a few days later. The strongest last a few hours after that. Then the vampires can break down the hidden wall and enter without issue. But this wasn't some one-time thing, no. It's time to reset the trap and show off how it works. A beam starts to build off. That's the linchpin upon which everything else is literally built. A little scaffolding goes in nearby so that they can reach the center and build 2 walls atop that beam. A little bit more scaffolding, and then beams go out in every direction. Floors go in atop these until, a day after the last raider died, everything's ready again. Simple, yet effective. Some shrines go in atop just to get rid of more stone, but they also lend it a nice aesthetic. So how's this all work? The beam at the bottom has a really high stability, which is conferred to everything built atop it, and that includes the beams built off that lone wall at the top. That lets the floors reach out quite far, allowing the trap to ensnare dozens of enemies. When that beam at the bottom gets deconstructed, everything tumbles down with it. Enemies atop it get dropped down into the pit they can't escape from. And the best part? This isn't unique. It takes 3 days to starve people, and 1 more to reset the trap, but vampires can build as many of these as they want. They do each take several seasons to mine out, but once they're in, the vampires can just wall them all off so that there's only ever 1 open at a time. There's no limit to the number of meals ready to be kept in waiting. Let entire kingdoms come. They'll all meet the same dark fate.